Go ahead, Jamie.
Great. So we are kicking off this month's Climate Justice Learning Series on where does our trash go, waste, recycling, and climate justice. Just some quick reminders. It is important that you select interpretation. Do not leave it blank. So select English or Spanish. Those are our options today. So use that little globe icon to select English or Spanish. And then if you have any chat or questions that are coming out throughout the presentation, you can feel free to use the chat box for questions, for comments, resources. If you want to just say, yay, I love this, or it was really interesting, giving feedback, we'll be monitoring the chat throughout the guest speakers' presentations. The globe should be on the bottom bar for you where the mute, unmute. If you don't see it, then you can look for 3 dots. And then if you hit that, then you'll see the more options. So those should be where you find it. If you run into any more trouble, feel free to DM us on that. And we'll also encourage use of emojis if you are able to be on camera for our speakers. Sometimes that's helpful for them to see reactions or how things are landing for you. But of course, that's optional. We are recording this session. It will be posted online, so it's up to you. Moving forward, Samana.
So if this is your first time in this learning series, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And we just wanted to share what the goals are for this climate justice learning series. It is to develop a shared understanding around climate justice and climate equity, have an understanding of what these terms mean and how they look and feel in our day-to-day life here at the county, build skills to advocate for policy change, honor traditional and cultural knowledge around sustainability, which will definitely come up in today's topic, provide capacity building to lead and partner on climate solutions, and improve access to resources, funding, and decision making. Thank you. And this learning series was co-developed with the Climate Equity Community Task Force. This task force is still in existence and meeting, and it came out of 2020 when we did an update to the Strategic Climate Action Plan for the county. That was also during the update that we saw an integration of climate equity through the Sustainable and Resilient Frontline Community section of the plan. And we're actually in the midst of updating it again because it gets updated every 5 years, which we can share more information about that later. But essentially community members across different geographic locations, ethnic and racial backgrounds, and also the type of work and communities that they serve are part of this task force, and they give a lot of feedback on the kinds of workshop topics we should bring and just really the design of this entire workshop. And in that way, it can really be rooted in community expertise and needs. And so this is the Sustainable and Resilient Frontline Community section that I was referring to earlier. So again, this was developed in 2020 with community input, and community designed these 8 sections where they saw that, climate change and social justice and equity really tied in together. So we have everything from community leadership down to transportation. And in between, we have community capacity development, which this is part of, right? People don't know what they don't know. So we want to make sure that the community is being informed about different topics relating to climate change. We also want to make sure that frontline communities can be part of the green jobs pathway that are coming up with this new investment in climate change. And we also want people to feel safe. So we have a section on community health and emergency preparedness, making sure people are aware of when emergencies are happening, such as like wildfires or extreme heat, but also have a say on maybe how we keep safe. Topics like climate resilience hubs have been coming up recently under that section. Also food systems and food security. So thinking about where food comes from and what access do we have to produce and organic and culturally relevant foods. Also, we have housing security and anti-displacement. So thinking about where people live and how those homes can be climate resilient, but also not further displace our communities, energy justice and utilities, transportation access, and equity. And so again, if you're more interested in this, please just feel free to email me. I'll share my email later today to get more information on that.
And the county is in the process of updating this right now, so it's a good time to get involved and reach out to Samara. This learning series came out of this section, this focus area 2 of community capacity development, and it was a desire for communities to learn more about climate topics and be able to prepare community members, staff members, and frontline community members around climate justice topics. So to that end, we've covered a lot. We've covered a lot of topics. This is just in the recent past, everything from policy and advocacy at the local and state level to exploring climate justice policy in King County, looking at city planning and environmental justice, speaking to the housing and anti-displacement section. And then we are going to have 2 more workshops after this one. One will be an Indigenous walking tour and learning about the history of Native peoples in the Seattle area, and that'll be in person at the University of Washington. Encourage folks to sign up for that. And then we'll be doing another Climate Justice 101, which we do multiple times through the year, that will be in early December. Do you walk through goals, Samara?
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna put in the chat that we don't have the RSVP form yet for the October workshop, but we will soon. So just keep on the lookout for that. So our goals for today, we're really excited about this topic. This was actually one of the top voted topics by both the task force, but also just from past learning series we've heard from people wanting to see this. So today we'll learn what a zero waste mindset is and how you can incorporate it into your life. Understand why waste is a climate justice issue, so making some of those connections, and develop a high level, so meaning, you know, kind of more of an overview, understanding where our trash, recycling, and compost goes in King County, and just understand where you can find more information about where things go. I know that can be a stressful process, especially if maybe in your home country or another place you've lived, it's been done differently, so it's important to know the local context of where the things should go. And with that, we'll go into also introducing our presenters today, so you know a little bit more about us. So my name is Samara Almonte. I use she, her pronouns, and I am part of the King County Executive Climate Office. And what we wanted to do as presenters is also share an insight on how we grew up understanding waste, zero waste potentially, and just how does our community and our what's it called, our upbringing influence our relationship with waste. So for me, my family is historically from a small town in Mexico in Purépecha territory. And the first top 2 pictures, so this little girl who's my niece, she and her family sell food throughout the week in our community, and similar to restaurants here, you know, they use reusable plates to serve people. So that is a pretty low waste method. However, even when people want food to go, and one of the main things she sells is pozole, which is a broth, a soup. So when people want to go, they bring their own little like pots, like the picture on the right of her, and people will just have that to go. So it's really nice because then it reduces, you know, the amount of waste that we see with to-go containers. And that's just something that to me, I think is able to happen in such a small town because everyone knows each other and it's just really comfortable to be able to do that. The other thing, and we also do that with bread. So actually that picture on the bottom is kind of a similar idea. It's such a small town that people, you know, are able to produce just kind of the daily bread and people buy it daily. And so people will bring their own baskets rather than take home a plastic bag. So I really like these little things that we do. They're probably more common than not, but I just think it's a good way to think about the amount of waste that we use. And then also, so the top right, thinking about corn. Corn is a really important food in our culture, and as it is in many Mesoamerican cultures. And you know, you probably have had like street corn maybe here in the United States, and it can either be like on a stick, the husk, or you'll have it in a like a styrofoam cup. And so what we've been seeing lately is a lot of different communities, including my own, have gone to a more traditional practice of instead using a styrofoam cup, they'll use the husk of the corn itself to serve you the mixture of the corn. And this, I think, is a lot more connected to, again, our indigenous ways of using every piece of the meal. So with corn, you know, we're using the actual granos, actual grains on it, but we're also using the leaves as we do to maybe make tamales or to make corundas, which are traditional in my community. And then all of that is compostable. So there's really no waste, except for maybe the spoon that's still being used as plastic. But again, that's a significant reduction versus using styrofoam cups. And lastly, the area where my family's from produces a majority of the avocados across the world. And the avocado plants take up a lot of water. And in the last couple of years, we've been seeing, unfortunately, because of climate change, more droughts in the area. And so folks have had to go back to ways of saving water and being able to conserve it for those dry months. So we've installed cisterns, as you can see in the picture, connected to some maybe roofs of infrastructure in those avocado farms to collect water from like the really rainy seasons, which just kind of ended, and then save up for the drier months. So there's just some ways that I saw in my community growing up that made me realize, you know, we can use, recycle, and really have a small impact in our community when it comes to waste. And I'll pass it over to Jamie to share more about her story.
So hello, everyone. Jamie Strobel. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the co-coordinators of the Climate Just Learning Series with Samara. So you probably recognize us from previous ones. But I wanted to highlight a few stories of how my connection to waste and zero waste mindset. One is so many cultures, but also especially in cultures that I'm a part of, utilize leaves as packaging for food. And so the first photo on the left is sasa mochi, which is also kashiwa mochi and other types of mochi. We use leaves, this is using bamboo leaf, but different types of leaves to package your food in. And then in the middle picture, that's a picture of lau lau. I'm originally from Hawaii and grew up there. And so this is how you like cook your food and serve it is all in tea leaves and kala leaves. And so I know that that's the case for so many cultures around the world. We used to have plates that we use like banana leaves for a plate or other types of leaves, and we've kind of moved away from that. You may have seen now though that you can get like plates that are made out of bamboo leaves again and really expensive. And I'm like, oh, this is funny. Now it's being sold as something. But so many of our cultures have utilized natural products like this that just go back to the land afterwards. On the right top, I grew up where so many households, my neighbors, like people around us, we all had like your drawer of plastic bags that you folded into little triangles. And I had one of my good neighbors growing up just had like so neatly organized. It was like a filing cabinet of plastic bags that were always reused, always like washed and reused, and never really thrown away. And then the fan is there because my uncle used to like always bring home, he'd be like, did you see someone left a perfectly good fan out on the curb over there? And he would like come to our house with all this stuff that was like, it's just a little broken, he would say. He's like, it's just a little broken, it just needs this one thing. And my mom would be like, oh, he always keeps bringing junk over to the house. But he, to his credit, would fix all of these things. And I remember getting a fan, totally working fan from him because he repaired it. And we were able to use it in the house. And it saves money and we got to reuse things. I would also say that like in Hawaii, I grew up on the island of Oahu, and we also have a relationship with trash and waste that is complicated too, because we have some of our electricity comes from incineration, which means actually burning trash to be able to generate electricity, which has all kinds of concerns around health concerns and sustainability. And a lot of our dump sites and waste sites are on the west side of Oahu, which is also where it's predominantly Native Hawaiian. And so there is this like tenuous relationship too of like where those dumps get sited, where who lives by them, what are the health risks that come from that. And the middle picture is actually garbage being packaged. There was a time period in the early 2010s when we were running out of space in our dumps. And so they were like, well, is it cheaper to just literally package it and ship it to Washington State and have it it put into dumps in Washington State? And when you're a place that doesn't have a lot of land and land is a premium, that's a thing that comes up. And so this didn't end up like totally happening and working out. Obviously, there's a lot of people being like, this is not how we deal with waste. But it's even more of an imperative when you live in places that are limited in that way to be so mindful of how much waste we generate, where does it go, what is it contributing to, and what that means for how we're even generating electricity. So it's all connected. And I'll pass to Moji.
Hi, everyone. My name's Moji. My pronouns are she, her. I'm one of the guest speakers tonight, so you'll be hearing a lot from me, but I want to share a couple of quick examples from my childhood of what zero waste looked like before we even called it zero waste. I also had the plastic bag of plastic bags at my house, but I didn't include it on my slide. But I have a picture of toilet paper and paper towel rolls because that was the most common item that my parents would put in the trash, and I would find it there, take it out and say, hey, this goes in the recycling, and tell them where it goes properly. And so that was a common occurrence in my household growing up. I was always teaching my parents about what goes where. So I've been doing this professionally for 6 years, but I've been doing it really my whole life. The Ziploc bag is another example of zero waste habits in action from my childhood. I would pack my lunch, and then my parents would have me bring back the Ziploc bag at the end of the day, wash it out, dry it with the dishes, and then use it the next day. And so we were always repurposing plastic bags over and over again. And then my final example I want to share for this section is I learned how to sew when I was younger in about middle school because I grew 6 inches in one summer. And my mom was like, I am not buying you new pants this year. You're going to learn how to sew. So I took, scraps of things and made really wonky pants. But I learned how to be resourceful with things because my parents didn't want to spend money on new things. So those are a couple examples from my childhood. And I'll pass it over to Nina.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nina Olivier. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the guest speakers this evening from the King County Solid Waste Division. I serve as a Circular Economy Program Manager, which I'm really excited Moji will talk more about. As far as circular and zero waste stories from my childhood and also present, I'll start with my parents and I grew up composting quite a bit. It began with my mom having lots of plants in the house and making compost tea from scraps, including like carrot stalks and celery stalks, lettuce, maybe unused vegetable and fruit ends, boiling it and making it into a nutritious tea she'd feed her plants. And I at first thought she was crazy, but then we saw some really awesome improvements and the plants in the house grew just so beautifully. I also grew up saving scraps and putting them in compost bins and making compost for our plants in the backyard. So been long-time composter. I'll turn to Jet City device repair. This is a fun example. A lot of people are shocked that my cell phone is actually almost 10 years old now. I have had the same cell phone and I've dropped it. I've accidentally gone into rivers with it in my pocket. I've dropped it off a boat once. And what's so wonderful is here in the greater King County area and in Seattle, we have some options for device repair, and Jet City just happens to be in my neighborhood, and I'm actually good friends with them now. They know who I am when I come in, and they've been able to repair my device every time. They have methods if you do happen to drop your cell phone in water to dry it out and revive the battery, or do a battery switch out, and that's helped eliminate e-waste in my current life. And then going down, I wanted to highlight Wonderland Gear Exchange as just one of the fun examples here in King County in Seattle. We are very lucky. We have access to the beautiful mountains and waters and hiking. Sometimes that requires outdoor gear, and it can be really expensive to buy it brand new. I highly recommend checking out local gear exchange or secondhand gear stores for hiking boots or hiking poles, or even old used tents and camping equipment. I actually worked a summer at Wonderland, and just really have been going back ever since. They're a wonderful local store if you're in Seattle, and there are others around King County that are similar. But check out, keep your eye out for gear exchanges. It's a great way to thrift and or rent gear while avoiding to buy brand new, and create a more wasteful system. And then lastly, thrifting. That's the last picture on the slide there. Thrifting has been a part of my life since forever. I am one of 5 girls in our family. So growing up with 4 other sisters, buying brand new clothes was just not an option. And so thrifting was not only ingrained in us for a cost savings way, but also to lessen our impact on the environment. So thanks so much. I'll pass it to Hannah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Scholes, and I use she, they pronouns, and I work on policy and manage programs for the King County Solid Waste Division, lots of stuff related to recycling and circular economy. I'm from Olympia, so I grew up in this area, and definitely with all these skills and values to reduce waste. But I wanted to share a couple stories about my more recent adult life and how I show up in communities, my communities now, in a waste reducing way. So the picture in the upper right corner is me with a blue cart mascot that we used to work for Waste Management and do outreach for them and teach folks about recycling and what happens to all your stuff after it's picked up at the curb. And so I'm still that really exciting person at parties that will give you a TED Talk about what happens to your recycling. And then I have a picture of a ton of bags of bananas and then what they turned into later, which was banana bread. That was my neighbor who works at a smoothie shop and brought home a bunch of bananas and then distributed them around to anyone who would make banana bread. And I just feel like that was a really warm and cozy feeling for me that when neighbors have surplus, just like sharing amongst each other. And that's kind of connected to my last picture, Buy Nothing Project, which is where it's an online forum for just sharing things that you're not going to use anymore, giving them away for free to someone else who will use them. Which is the way I have acquired and traded out most of the things in my possession at this point. So that's a little about me.
So we'll just use this moment then, if you all could introduce yourselves to this group using the chat function. So if you give us your name and where you call home, where you live maybe, and an example of what's your example of zero waste. So we'll just take a moment for folks to enter into the chat. We'll also help our presenters know who's in the room and get a sense of their your connection to this issue. So if you please take a moment to just enter into the chat.
Hi, David. Hi, Esmeralda. Thank you for joining us.
If you have an example of zero waste, please add that in. Yes, composting, donating clothes and furniture around the house that you're not using. Thanks, Amal. Thanks, Marie. Conserving waste. Yeah, maybe not creating that at all to begin with. Ooh, trash artivist. I'd love to hear more about that. Thanks, Noelle. Hi, Cynthia. Recycling lots of household items, exchanging with family members, hand-me-downs.
I really like the Maria, what she shared. It's kind of unique that making a grocery list to buy in only what you need. We'll definitely talk about that today, about just like consumption and especially in this country, how we go about that in as a culture. So that's a really good one, reducing the amount of things you buy. Because I feel so guilty every time I have something in the pantry or in the fridge that I bought that I probably didn't need or didn't have a plan for, and then it has to go to the trash. On a journey to going vegan. Interesting.
All the foods that we served using leaves. Yep, thank you, Jill. So many. Ooh, sewing your own clothes. These are skills that like Moji and Iz have that I need to learn.
Yeah, used kids gear. I think about that a lot, like how much stuff you need for a baby. And it's great to be able to have handy downs.
Well, keep adding those into the chat. We'll keep looking at them and taking a look, and I will pass over to Moji for the bulk of our workshop today.
All right, can everyone see my screen? I hope you can. If you can't, just come off mute. Let me just get into full screen, 1 second. But while I figure out technology, I just want to share that a lot of the things that we're sharing in the chat are proof that you already know way more about what we're talking about today than you probably think. You're already experts. What we want to do today is talk about where our trash goes, specifically here in King County. I'm going to talk about kind of the source of the problem and why we're even talking about trash, and especially why it's a climate or environmental justice issue. Then I'm going to go into talking about some ideas about what we can do about it, what are some solutions, what are some paths we can take forward, and then there'll be plenty of time for question and discussion. So I love seeing the notifications in the chat coming up. I can't always read them, but if you have thoughts or questions, please add them to the chat, and I will have Samara and Jamie help me facilitate conversations going forward. So let's dive in. Where does our trash go? I want to share one more example of zero waste from probably many of our childhoods, but that moment where you see that gorgeous blue tin of butter cookies, maybe it was on your grandma's fridge like it was for me, and then you go to open it thinking that it's going to be those great cookies and it's sewing supplies inside, and that was always like the most disheartening moment, but it's a great example of zero waste in action. That was just the way that folks lived. It wasn't called anything special or had a certain name. It was just a way people did things. And I think that's just a great example to share. On this slide, this is a slide that I show at the beginning of almost every single workshop I teach when I talk about zero waste and zero waste mindset, because it very succinctly explains the problem that we're trying to address here. Why are we even talking about trash? And so you can really clearly see on the left side, there's a shopping cart full of anything that you can buy, and that can be a physical shopping cart where you actually going out and getting, groceries or errands, or it could be that online shopping cart. And eventually, after maybe a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months, maybe some years, it ends up as trash. And even if we reuse things, repurpose things, the majority of things that we consume are going to end up in a trash bin someday. The average American generates about 4.9 pounds of trash per day. And I actually had to update that stat. It's been 4.5 pounds per person per day for a long time. And so that's only going up. And this would not be a problem if we lived on an unlimited planet where we have unlimited resources and, things just can pop out of nowhere. But we live on a finite planet. And so we can't continue to just make things, buy things, and then throw them away at the pace that we're doing it. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve with this whole zero waste conversation. So a technical term I want to share with you of how to explain what we're doing in the current moment. What the problem is that we live in what's called a linear economy. So basically, the way that our stuff, all the stuff that we consume is existing is in the shape of a straight line. 3 words that really explain what a linear economy is are the words take, make, and waste. And so all that's saying is that we take stuff from the earth, whether it's mining, minerals or ore or things from the ground, or harvesting, trees or other plant materials. We take things from the earth, we make them or manufacture them into things that we buy and use and makes our lives easier and more fun and more enjoyable. And then eventually they end up as waste. And so it's a straight line from taking from the earth all the way to waste. And again, this would not be a problem if we had unlimited resources, but alas, we don't. And so we want to move away from this way of being, this linear economy. And what we want to move towards is away from the linear on the left side of the screen. We want to move through a recycling economy, which is kind of what we might see now with certain materials like paper or metals or glass, how we collect them in recycling, they are remanufactured into other things, and eventually they might have to end up as trash, but we do have a couple of reuses in there. Eventually, we want to even go past that and get to what we call a circular economy, where there is little to no waste existing at all. And so we figured out creative ways to design out waste that we're not just taking from the earth and throwing it away, but we're actually thinking about the whole circle of life of everything that we consume and use in our lifetimes. So what we're trying to go towards with a whole zero waste mindset is a circular or more circular economy. So a little bit more about the technical definition behind zero waste, and this will come back around at the end with our King County Solid Waste Division folks talking about the RE+ program. But the foundation of where that name comes from is thinking about all of the words that start with re that involve waste. So think about reimagine, repair, repurpose, recycle, refuse. Rot is not a re-word, but it's cut off there, and then rethink. So all of those clever ways to reimagine the way that we consume things that avoid the trash bin. So we want to have as little things going into the landfill as possible. All of those other creative and innovative ways that we were sharing in the chat earlier are what we want to focus our energy towards. Some technical definitions have zero waste, meaning that like up to 90% of our trash should be on the left side of the screen, all of these re words, and only 10% should be ending up in the landfill, with as little as possible ending up as pollution or being incinerated. And so we want to really focus on those creative re words that will be explored later on in this presentation. If you have other rewords too, feel free to drop them in the chat. I would love to know if there's ones that I'm not thinking of at this moment. And a very classic set of words that start with the word letters RE are reduce, reuse, recycle. If you grew up in the 90s like I did, this was like the most common environmental slogan that we had. And it's always so interesting when I talk about what I do for work. And the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, recycling, I recycle. And I say, that's so great, that's wonderful, keep that up. But reduce and reuse are first in the slogan for a reason. We want to reduce the way that we consume first, and then reuse what's left. And then as a last resort, we're recycling. So recycling is often the first thing that comes to mind for folks, but it really should be the very last resort because we've done such a good job at reducing and reusing first. So always remember this slogan. It's still very relevant, very perfect, but think about the order as we move through this presentation. And I also want to share this slide. I tend to remix the slide a lot because I always find new examples when I'm watching Netflix or on YouTube or whatnot. But zero waste, although it's become a trendy term in the last 15 to 20 years, zero waste is not new as a concept. Like we were all saying in the introduction, this is how many Indigenous cultures have lived since the beginning of time. It just wasn't called zero waste. Some other words that people use to describe the exact same mindset are, frugal, resourceful, thrifty, scrappy. Those are all the exact same thing as what we're talking about here. So a couple of examples, if you want some, additional reading or additional viewing, are a couple documentaries on Netflix that I think do a beautiful job of showing zero waste from different perspectives. And so the one in the middle is Gather, which is a documentary about native food systems here on Turtle Island. And they talk about using every single piece of the plant or the animal for different functions, different medicines, and just having such an in-depth knowledge about all the different ways that you can use the same thing very creatively. And so Gather is a really awesome documentary that talks about that. Similarly, High on the Hog in the bottom left of the screen is all about Black food and kind of how Black food became Black food, what that means, how culture has kind of moved from the African continent into the States, and how that is another form of zero waste, how folks had to be so creative and resourceful with their food. And so that's another documentary. And then one I added very recently as I was thinking about hip hop culture. I was on a tangent with a friend the other day, but the man on the far right is Dapper Dan, who is just a Black fashion icon. If you don't know who he is, definitely look him up if you're into hip hop. But all of hip hop, whether it's fashion or even the music itself and hip hop culture in general, is a lot of remixing and creative reuse of old things, making old new again. I was listening to an album that was sampled in another artist's song, and I was like, oh my gosh, I recognize that. So all of these ideas, even though they're not specifically about trash, they're about creatively reusing things in different ways, which is exactly the mindset that we're trying to get across with this whole idea of a zero waste mindset. And so with all of that, with the idea of Indigenous ways of being and ways that cultures have been doing things since the beginning of time, and the more technical, more nerdy definitions of zero waste, I've kind of combined those into my personal definition of zero waste that I call a zero waste mindset. And so it's meant to be not so restrictive that we're actually only trying to make absolutely no waste. It's more of a lens or a way of looking at the world. And so my definition of a zero waste mindset is a lens through which we can adjust the way that we consume and produce through intentional and consistent action. And then an additional thought of it considers both what and who we can consider disposable. So in my world, zero waste is not just about the physical things that we throw away or the things that we consume, but it's also about the people that are involved at every step of making, harvesting, throwing away, what happens to the people surrounding those places, and the processes that they involve. So zero waste mindset is a very holistic perspective for me, and I hope to share that with you. So So let's get into some numbers, some data. If there are any data nerds here, this is a pie chart of data I pulled from a King County report. You can Google this, or I'm happy to share it in the chat at the break. But essentially, every few years, King County does what's called a waste characterization. And all that means is that some folks, some very brave and wonderful folks, will dig through trash all across King County and in various places to better understand what we throw away as residents of King County. And so as of 2022, this is the latest one that I could find, this is the breakdown of what the trash that we generate looks like by percentage. It's by the weight of all of the trash. And so if you can see on the top right side of the pie chart, you'll see that paper, food, and plastic are kind of the majority of things. If you think about what you might throw away in a typical day, it's probably a lot of the things in that category, whether it's, you know, the rest of your lunch or some paper, some mail, some scrap mail that you got, or some plastic packaging. That's the majority of the trash that we throw away, which is probably no surprise. The bottom left has this other category that I had to look up, but it's mostly construction waste. So things that you might not have on a daily basis, but it's when buildings are being built, there's a lot of stuff that comes out of them. So that's what that section is mostly made out of. And then, you know, other organics, glass, metal, wooden yard waste comprise the rest. But by and large, those first three categories are really what we're seeing in the trash. And for me, it's helpful to kind of imagine what those categories are and how I might be contributing to them. So hopefully this information is helpful as we go into some more solutions or things you might try to reduce your waste in those areas. So this slide is meant to talk about what kind of the impacts of waste are. And so this is a not so pleasant picture of trash on a beach somewhere. This is just a photo I got from the internet, so I'm not sure where it is, but imagine any beach that you've been on, whether it's in your backyard or when you're on vacation. You might see little bits of plastic trash, little bits of packaging that might have come from the restaurant nearby or just washed up on the shore somehow, and how just frustrating that is. I know that the picture of, you know, the turtle with a straw in its nose became such a viral image for waste. And so when we think about where does our trash go and how it becomes a climate and environmental justice issue, this image I feel like is a great encapsulation of that, because we have to think about not only does our trash go into, you know, landfills or recycling facilities near us, oftentimes what happens is something called waste colonialism, where our landfills might be full or our systems are broken in some way. And so our waste is exported to other places. And so it ends up looking something like this, where in that transit or because of a broken system, our waste ends up in the environment. So this is, again, an example of how trash becomes a climate justice or environmental justice issue. A couple other ways, specifically thinking about King County, thinking about how we have a huge port in the Seattle area and how so much materials are being shipped, flown, driven through our neighborhoods, and the fumes from all of those vehicles end up having higher asthma rates for Black and Brown communities in our areas. And that is indirectly related to waste, but is very much connected. And so thinking about how our consumption is also related to public health, related to pollution, is what I want to get across with this slide as a public health issue. And this is just another slide of a couple of news clippings or images I got from articles specifically in King County. I think I saw some folks from the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition who RSVP'd here, who are featured in the article on the right about Seattle having asthma hotspots. And that's due to a lot of the trucking and the airplane traffic that comes through moving all of the stuff that we consume. And so by addressing our consumption habits, reducing our consumption, and therefore reducing our waste, we are addressing these environmental justice issues. Okay, so now I'm going to get into where our trash goes. We're answering the question of this workshop. I'm going to break it down into where the stuff goes where we send it to the landfill, recycling, and composting. So I'm going to share 3 different places where our trash goes. This is kind of the fun part of the presentation. So here, again, this is a stock photo just because it's nicer and clearer to see. But when we throw our, used tissues, plastic packaging, old things that we don't want, for me, like cat food packets, when that goes into our trash bin, the trash truck comes by in our on whatever our assigned trash day is. They pick it up, they take it over to a landfill. Here in King County, I have a map here of where our landfill is. It's called Cedar Hills landfill, which is just kind of southeast of the East Renton Highlands in unincorporated King County. There is a giant, and I mean giant, hole in the ground where all of these semi trucks come in and dump all of that trash into a giant hole. I went to the King County landfill about a year ago, and my tour guide told me that there are 130 semi trucks each day that are brought into the landfill, and that's like pretty average. And so just imagine one semi truck and imagine the amount of stuff that can fit into that, and then multiply it by 130, and just imagine that dumping every single day, 365 days of the year. That's the pace that we're filling up our local landfill. And so that stuff doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't break down. It's not really adding any use. It's just kind of taking up space because we don't have anything better to do with it. And so when we think about reducing waste, often the folks who work in this space think about how quickly our landfills are filling up and how much of a problem that is. Because once we run out of space, we run out of space. And we either have to make a new landfill, which is not ideal, or figure something else out. And so when we throw our stuff into the black or brown, usually a black bin that's head to the landfill, that's where it goes. There is a little bit of technology about methane collection, which I'll talk about in the composting section, but most of the time, nothing is really happening with that trash, and it's just sitting there for years and years and years. So we want to move away from that as much as possible. So that's the easy one. Recycling, I feel like this is the one that people are most curious about because it's a little bit mysterious, and especially because it's different depending on where you live. So if you've moved from a different area besides King County, I'm originally from Michigan, and so recycling was slightly different there, but by and large, what happens is another truck will come and pick up your recyclable materials. So here in King County, that's things like metal soda cans and glass bottles and paper and cardboard, all the stuff that you'll put in your blue bin. The trash people will come pick it up. They will take it to a facility called a MRF, or a material recovery facility, where it'll be sorted. So here's a short moving image, I hope it works, of what the inside of one of those facilities looks like. They will take those giant trucks full of recyclable materials. They'll kind of dump them onto an assembly line that weaves through a giant warehouse. I'll play it again so you can keep watching. That weaves through a giant warehouse, and they sort the materials out into their different material types. So they want all the cardboard in one pile, all of the metal in another pile, all of the glass in another pile. And what they're ultimately working towards is something that looks like, if you'll go to the next slide, something that looks like this. They're called bales of recyclable material. And so in this picture, these are bales of cardboard. And so the whole, name of the game with recycling is all about sorting and selling the materials. And so our job as consumers is to make sure that those materials are as easy to sort and sell as possible, which means that we put the right things in the bin. We follow all of the guidelines and rules about keeping things clean, empty, and dry, that we're not throwing things that we hope are recyclable, but actually are not. And because at the end of the recycling process, these bales of materials are sold to folks who will make them into new products. And so what you don't want is, say, for example, this bale of recyclable cardboard, and say someone threw, a jug of old moldy milk in their recycling bin. You don't want to have smelly, moldy cardboard. And so that's why it's so important to know what goes where and making sure that we're doing our best job at recycling properly. Not necessarily using it as our first solution, but just doing it as best as we possibly can, given the guidelines that apply to our city. So I'll share a resource for that towards the end, but this is why recycling is kind of the thing that comes to mind most. It's the most visible trash solution. And finally, so we talked about trash, landfill, recycling, compost. This was new to me when I moved to the Seattle area. I had done a little bit of composting previously, but having a compost bin at my house, that was brand new to me. And so what happens there is that another truck will come by and take things from your recycling bin, whether it's your food waste, your yard waste, grass clippings, just old branches, if you have, trees that have fallen branches, all of that stuff, organic material, will go into a bin. That truck is taken to a facility right next to where the landfill is in King County called Cedar Grove. And, or that's one of the places that it's taken. And the material is kind of fed through machines, put into piles and broken down in a kind of controlled process to turn it into soil. And so at the end of the process, it'll look something like this with healthy microbes and worms crawling through it, which is really great. It might be gross to hold in your hand, but it's really wonderful for soil health. And so we take all of that organic material, all of those nutrients that are in those organic materials, and turn them into this really nutritious material that can be used to fertilize our plants, to mulch things, can be used in agricultural settings. And that's really, all this really is, if you've never composted by yourself before, all this is nature's recycling. This is actually composting is where I started my zero waste journey, and I'll share more about that in a couple of slides. But it's just the coolest thing to see, that old apple core that you had for lunch, in a few months or like maybe in the next year, it can actually be used to grow another apple at some point. So it's just like the coolest circle of life ever. So I'm coming up on a break, but this is the resource that I want to share, and I'm going to ask one of my co-presenters if you're able to share the link for this. This is a King County resource called What Do I Do With? And it's a website that you can visit. If you have an item from, like you can see on the screen, appliances, batteries, a random chair, landscaping materials, things that you don't know what the heck to do with, this website, you can type it in or sort through the categories and it'll tell you the best way to dispose of it. I want to, with this resource, stress that the importance of this resource is what I was saying earlier about sorting things properly so that we don't have contamination in the individual streams. If we can keep it out of the landfill, that's ideal, but we also don't want to put things into the recycling or the compost that don't belong there. And so this tool, What Do I Do With, is a great way for you to figure out which bin does it go to, or if it's not one of those three options, where else can I take it for it to be disposed of properly or turn into something useful that can be used in another situation. So hopefully someone shared this link, or we can share it again at the break, but this is a really helpful resource for all across King County to figure out what do I do with all of these random materials.
Link is in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think this is my last slide before a break. So I've been talking a lot about what is the problem that we're trying to solve. What do we, what are some of the ways that things work so that we can figure out what to do within those existing systems, or what systems that need to be built to support or be an alternative. And I want to talk about why, why this matters so much to think about all of these things. The first reason why is that all of this can be really confusing. I know I've been talking for about half an hour now, and I've shared a lot of information with you. I don't expect it all to stick the first time, and sometimes it can be frustrating to learn all of these different rules, or if you move from one city to another, things change, or maybe at work and at home, there are two separate sets of rules that you have to keep track of. and sometimes the rules change over time. And so all of these things that we're talking about, where things go, how to properly recycle, compost, and put things in the landfill, it can be confusing. And so it's important to kind of take some time to study up, refresh our memories, remind ourselves of the rules so that we can do the best that we can, given what resources are available to us. So that's reason number one why we talk about this. Number two is that I wrote all the numbers are going up. And what I mean by all the numbers are thinking about landfill capacity. So like I said earlier, our landfill, especially here in King County, is filling up, and the date that is projected is in sight. So we can project when that landfill might be full, and it's coming up pretty soon. So what we want to do is figure out ways to reduce the amount of stuff that we're sending to the landfill so that we're not exhausting that space as quickly as we have been. Another number that is going up at an increasing rate are things like methane emissions, greenhouse gases. So again, connecting this back to environmental and climate justice, a lot of the issues with climate change all stem back to we have increasing amounts of greenhouse gases. We used to call it global warming, now it's climate change, but that same concept, we continue to increase those numbers, which is not a good sign. And so in the case of trash, greenhouse gases, specifically methane, come from landfills when we put organic waste into those landfills, or putting organic waste into landfills creates an enormous amount of methane. And the thing about methane specifically as a greenhouse gas is that it is, I believe the stat is 25 times more potent than CO2 or carbon dioxide. And so having organic materials in our landfills is even worse than just regular carbon emissions. And so that's why it's so important to keep that organic material out of the landfill and remember to compost as much as we possibly can. And finally, the final reason I want to share why this is so important to talk about, to dig into and share ideas around this, is that it encourages us to be creative and find creative solutions. One of my favorite, and I'm going to butcher the exact quote, but it's something about how like we need creativity to live, even if you don't think that you're a creative person, or if creativity makes you think about like art or being an artist. I always challenge that and like to say that creativity is all around us. I use creativity to make this presentation. I use it every day in my job. All of the solutions that we shared at the beginning of this workshop with all of our, plastic bag full of plastic bags, or sewing, or changing our diet, all of those things are creative acts. And so it excites me to think about sustainability or zero waste as a creative endeavor rather than just kind of like a technical solution-based idea. So yeah, I'm going to pause there and take a drink of water. Are there any questions? We're going to take a quick break, but before I do, are there any questions?
Moji, you got a question in the chat that was about your pie chart of if that pie chart included recycling and composting or just solid waste.
That is just solid waste. I believe that is only from what goes to the landfill, I believe. Actually, I'm not 100% sure, so I might want to fact check that, but if some King County folks know, that would be great.
You're right. That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Any other questions?
Is the trash
someone-
also, oh, go ahead, Samana.
Yeah, I was going to read the question. Is the trash also sorted or only recycled?
So he's talking about this pie chart again. Is stuff in this pie chart?
No, in general.
Yeah, like how you showed that video, how recycling gets sorted, probably
Yeah.
thinking about like, does the trash get sorted?
Not at the moment. That's something that maybe the King County folks can talk about later on, but if they want to, but currently only recycling is sorted that way. So yeah, just that stream. Anything else? Or we can take a quick 5-minute break.
Moji, can you speak a little bit to the fact that recycling sometimes that we think is getting recycled isn't always getting recycled?
Yeah, yes. So I think this is the most common what's the word that I want to say? This is where people get frustrated the most because especially in recent years, there have been a lot of news headlines about recycling doesn't matter anymore. It's all going to the landfill anyway. Like, who cares about recycling? I understand the perspective because there are times where recyclable materials that are intended to be recycled don't ultimately get recycled for a multitude of reasons. A major one of those reasons is because of contamination. And how that happens is that, cities might say, we accept these 10 items, and then folks say, well, this thing is kind of like that. I would love for it to be recycled. They put it in the bin. Folks don't want to buy the material once it's sorted, and then it no longer is of any value. And so what we want to do is avoid what people call wish cycling, which is that you wish it was recyclable, but it really is not. And we want to avoid that so that only the materials that truly can be recycled where you live are ending up in that blue bin. So that's, I think that answers your question.
I got
Andre, I want to go to the chat first, and then I'll come to you. So we had a question in the chat that said, why does Seattle's trash go to Oregon's landfills, but other places in King County goes to Cedar Hills? That's, I think, speaking to the jurisdictional question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, the King County folks can jump in at any time, but essentially, City of Seattle and King County are just treated as two separate entities. And so the King County waste system is its own thing minus Seattle. And honestly, it's probably because there's not enough space for all the stuff in Seattle and the rest of King County to go into the landfill in our backyard. And so that's why it needs to be put on a train and sent to Oregon, because there's more space out there.
Thank you, Moji. Did any of the King County folks want to add something?
Yeah.
With the
Yeah, I
same
would
thing.
just say Moji has it totally right, but King County has an agreement with all the cities within King County about using the landfill. And Seattle for decades has chosen to manage their waste separately. So they just have a separate contract for where their waste goes, and they don't pay into the same system as the rest of the cities. And that was kind of just, yeah, a decision made long ago, probably related to capacity issues, like Moji said.
All right, are we ready for the break, or do we have one more question?
I feel like Andre, if you're still here, you wanted to unmute to ask a question. Do you still want to ask your question?
Yeah, black plastic. According to King County does not take black plastic for recycling. That's because it's much harder for black plastic to be filtered out and separated because of the optical stores. That technology is changing, so they're making it now so they can do it. But King County doesn't take black plastic, yet the city of Seattle does. Has that changed in the past year or so, to where the rest of King County takes black plastic? And additionally, I'm on the Washington State Recycling Association tribal subcommittee, and I'm trying to find maps of landfills, which I got one from Carolyn Bowie today from Department of Ecology. But I'm looking for maps of landfills and indigenous nations, along with marginalized communities, and how they're impacted. If anybody has any information on that, it would be greatly appreciated. But yeah, the black plastic one would be a great one to know, because it's not separated out in on different guide sheets. And like flower pots is another one that King County or Seattle takes, but King County doesn't take. And that's making it really confusing for people. Where do I put this? How do I know? Because it's not listed.
Got it.
Most places.
Got it. I actually do not know the answer to this. So if the King County folks have an answer, that would be great.
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. So we don't normally make our guidelines about color. It's usually we try to tell people it's about shape. So like for plastics, bottles, tubs, and jugs are pretty universally accepted throughout King County. There are some, we call them kind of like fringe items, some items that you see less frequently. like plant pots that are accepted in some places and not others, even in cities throughout King County, and versus City of Seattle. So plant pots is one of those, and it really comes down to what the contract is between the city and the recycling company that they work with. So we actually have 4 different recycling companies, or we have 4 different recycling MRFs, like Moji mentioned. It's the place that the material goes to be sorted out, run by 3 different companies. And so those companies work out a contract with cities. And that's why sometimes the lists are a little bit different, because they're just working out these contracts with the cities about what they're going to accept in the recycling. But I do agree that it is very confusing. And one of the things where I'm going to talk about a little later is we're hoping there will be a statewide policy that would make it a statewide list, which would really reduce confusion for people. And one other thing I'll say about black plastic is that there's a group called the US Plastics Pact that creates a list of guidelines for how companies who are making these plastic materials and packaging can do a better job and make their packaging more recyclable. And one of their things on the list to not do, they have a list of items that they call problematic and unnecessary. And carbon black plastic is something on that list because it is very challenging to recycle. And you're right that the technology is always developing, so that might not forever be the case, but for right now, it's a recommendation for manufacturers to not make carbon black plastic items.
Thank you so much, Hannah. How are we doing on time, y'all? Can we take
Yeah, I think we
Ankita's
can take our
question,
break.
or should we have her put it in the chat?
Let's add it to the chat and keep moving because we'll have another time for questions.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that, Ankita, but if you could please just put your question in the chat, and we'll make sure to get it towards the end. Thank you.
So we can take our 5-minute break, yeah, and come back at 46 after, and then
Let's do 6:45 since we're running a little bit behind.
okay, great.
Just so you know, Moji, for some reason we see like the black bar, like the
Oh.
bottom bar of your computer screen. I don't know why. It wasn't present before.
Give me 1 second. 1 second. Is that better?
Yes, now it doesn't show it. Yep, you're good.
Good. All right. All right. So we're back from break. Just to ease back in, because I just talked at you for a minute. I like to share the feelings wheel just to see how we're processing all the information that I'm throwing at you. So this is a tool that was given to me by a therapist just to articulate like what is happening in your brain. And so would love if you take a look at this image and throw some words in the chat. If you're feeling excited, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling upset, would love to know where everyone's at as we get back into things. Awesome. So I see excited, determined. Awesome. These are positive so far. Happy. Okay, this is great. Interested, hopeful. We love to see it. We love to see it. Inspired. Okay, we'll keep going then. Love it. Awesome. With that energy, I want to share a little bit about the work that I do and how it relates to all of this, and kind of where all of the technical information that I've shared you, how that kind of formulates into my perspective. So the name of my company, my zero waste consulting company, is called Blue Daisy. And where that came from for me is the idea of looking at the anatomy of a daisy flower. I am not a botanist, so I have a very basic understanding, but essentially daisy flowers are really special because they have they're called composite flowers. There's 2 flowers in one, basically. So there's the inner yellow part that is called the disc florets. And then in a case of a blue daisy, which is a real flower, it's from like the southern part of the African continent. The ray part is a second type of flower. So it's a cool like combo flower. And for me, that represents an analogy of how all of this work, sustainability work, zero waste work, environmental climate justice work, starts with that internal work, figuring out what it looks like for you, what you could possibly do in your daily life, but also not relying on that burden being on an individual alone, and thinking about how we can reach out to our communities, our workplaces, the people that we know in our lives to kind of spread that energy. So it's a combination of individual and systemic change that creates the whole flower. So that's a little fun story that I like to share about the history of what Blue Daisy actually is and what we're doing here. Here's another, it looks very complicated, but this is another graphic created by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is an organization that focuses on circular economy, kind of like in a very high level and systemic way. They're leaders in this space. And it's a graphic that they created to explain what a circular economy is going to look like. So I want to point out a couple of things. I don't want to go too deep into the technical, but I just want to give more examples of what we're trying to do with this zero waste mindset. So on the right, there are some green arrows that are looping around. All of those arrows represent organic material flows. So organic materials like our food waste, yard waste, all of those things are being represented on the left side of the screen. On the right side of the screen are a bunch of blue arrows kind of looping around. Those are our inorganic materials. So they're called technical material flows. And that's things like your old iPhone, or that old chair in your apartment, or other materials that are not organic, essentially. And so all of these arrows are showing the materials being circulated, creating that circle of life that I was talking about with composting. What's really cool about this graphic is that it shows the smaller and more tight those loops are, the better it is, because it's using less resources and energy. And it's kind of keeping things closer to home. And so, for example, on the right side of the screen, sharing something with a friend is way better than all the way on the far right of recycling. So we'd rather share or fix something as opposed to resorting to recycling. And so this is just another graphic, another way to imagine that reduce, reuse, recycle, and in that order, showing what we're trying to do here. The last feature of this graph that I want to point out for now is at the very top, there's that little lightning bolt. And what that's explaining is that this circular economy is built on the foundation of a clean energy transition. So getting away from fossil fuels and into more renewable energies. And so as we are reducing our consumption, we're thinking about creative ways to reuse things, reduce our waste, and moving away from fossil fuels. All of this in combination is what it takes to create a viable climate solution and reduce our overall greenhouse gas emissions. So again, a very technical graphic, but just if your brain works this way, I wanted to show this graphic. So this is a picture of me, just sharing another personal story of how my zero waste journey started and how it's going to look so unique for everybody. So again, we've already shared so many examples in the chat about what you can individually do at zero waste. And it's all about, you know, your interest, your capacity, where you live, what you're into, of how you approach this. For me, that was with composting, which got me into gardening. And so this is a picture of me in my community garden. I believe this was last year, maybe 2 years ago, with so many carrots. I was drowning in carrots that year, but also have like sage and lavender, and it's wonderful. But I had never gardened or grown anything that I could eat or use until my mid-20s. And that was because where I lived in Wisconsin, we didn't have composting like on the curbside, so no one would come pick it up for us. And so I learned how to compost in my apartment through a process called bokashi composting. And all it is really is you're kind of fermenting your yard waste, and then I would take it to a community garden patch. And so, you know, I learned about composting for the first time. I'm trying it out. And then I was like, what do I do with all of this amazing soil? And that led me to gardening. And so now I'm growing my own food, you know, not completely feeding myself, but it's still a hobby that I continue to this day. And so my zero waste journey went on this pathway. And so this is what it looks like for me. It may look completely different for you, and that's totally okay. All I'm doing by showing this is that it's kind of fun to see how the different ways that this zero waste mindset might manifest in each individual person. So this is kind of the big question of, okay, I have all of this information. I understand that we have a problem. I'm hopeful, I'm inspired. I want to do something to reduce my waste, but how do I start? I've tried to simplify that and give you a bunch of ideas in 3 different categories of, first, just starting small. They always say Rome wasn't built in a day, but nothing really worthwhile was done in one day. It takes time to make these kind of shifts. So I'm going to give you some ideas of how to start very, very small. And maybe if you have family or friends who are still, you know, not quite convinced about this stuff, maybe this is where you start with them. The second category are habit shifts. So not just doing little things on a one-off basis, but actually changing the way that you move throughout the world. And then finally getting into systemic changes or bigger shifts. And that will lead us into our King County speakers about things that the county is doing that are kind of systemic solutions to waste, so that it's not only about individual people trying their best. So let's get into starting small. How can we possibly start small? Really easy things that are highlighted on this slide. Bringing your own anything really. In this picture, I have a water bottle, but you can bring your own coffee cup. You can bring your own bag to the grocery store, or you can bring your own container to a restaurant to take your leftovers. In King County, all of those things are totally good to do. And you may get weird looks. People might ask you questions, but these are ways that you can reduce single-use water bottles or single-use packaging in other food and beverage environments. And so bring your own is like one of the most straightforward ways to start small. You can also recycle. That's something that is very common. That's the top right image, or compost. Some other really helpful ways that I used when I first got started are something called a zero waste kit. And so that's just having like either in a tote bag or a little pouch, or just like in the seat of your car, wherever you're moving to places, having a couple of things that you might need on a day-to-day basis. So if you're like me, you love bubble tea or boba. I have a boba straw that I might take with me when I go out to get boba with some friends. That's a stainless steel straw that I can reuse, eliminates one single use straw. I've brought chopsticks when I get sushi. I bring my own forks and knives sometimes. If I'm having like a barbecue with friends, I'll bring plates or forks or other serving materials that we're not using, like single use, those tinfoil trays. So all examples of having like a set kit of materials that you might use on a day-to-day basis that you bring around with you. Some other examples of starting small, not pictured on this slide, doing your own trash audit at home. That's another really fun activity. If you've never dug through your own trash and like actually looked at all the things that you throw away, that could be a really fun thing to do, especially with kids. Or if you're not into that, that sounds really gross and icky to you, you can just leave a little sticky note or piece of paper next to your trash can and just write down all the things that you throw away in a day or a week. I did this years ago before I made this my job. And I noticed I eat a lot of snack food. I'm a big snacker, and I think that's fine and that's fun, but I just was able to see it more visibly that, okay, like you can cool it on the snacks maybe, and just notice what you're throwing away. So there's that quote about you can't manage what you don't measure. By doing a waste audit or just looking into your trash bin every once in a while, it can help you figure out ways to get creative and reduce waste. And a final way to start small, if you're have tried all these other things, is to do research on alternatives to products that you use. Household products, beauty products, anything in any of those categories, there's most likely a lower waste alternative. Some things I use around my house are things like toothpaste tablets. I'm not going to share any brands in this presentation, but switching from like a plastic tube into a tablet, I have like a metal container and these little tabs, and the packaging is all compostable. So there's no trash involved in my oral care routine. Things like household sprays that come in very small concentrated bottles, and then you just add water instead of buying those big bottles every time. That's another easy product alternative. Things of that nature are really great. So if you have other ideas about things that you might have changed, feel free to share them in the chat and we can swap ideas. But those are ways that individuals can start today, tomorrow, this week, and just try little things to reduce our waste over time. So now habit shifts. So once you've kind of gotten the hang of the little things, now you're going to think about how to actually shift your behaviors over time. And so just some images that are snippets of things you can try. Online shopping. It's so easy to press add to cart, buy now and pay later. So it makes it even easier. And sometimes we buy without thinking or asking someone if we can borrow or reuse or repurpose. So creating boundaries or rules for yourself, whether it's, no spend months or weeks, or if it's wait 24 hours before you buy something, or if it's, leave it in the cart overnight and see if you really want it the next day. All of those types of habits are helpful in shifting the way that we shop, specifically online. The middle image that I have there is someone grocery shopping. My grocery shopping habits have changed drastically since I've kind of embodied this zero waste mindset. It sounds absurd, but before I even thought seriously about what my waste in the grocery store might look like, I would just walk up and down every single aisle and just start grabbing things that looks good to me. And maybe I'd have a meal, maybe I wouldn't, but I did the grocery shopping. And now I come in with a specific list based on my meal plan, and I've shopped my fridge, I've looked at what I have, and only buy the things that I need so that I'm not wasting food. So I used to be very chaotic and no plan, and now I actually move with intention through the grocery store, which is not something that I ever thought about in depth before. And then finally, my last image on the far right is just a thrift store, finding things secondhand. You could find clothes, furniture, all kinds of home goods secondhand. I just moved into an apartment, and the first month, or a new space, and the first month of me moving there was just me on thrift stores and buy nothing groups, just sharing things that I was trying to get rid of or looking for. Even things as small as ordering things and having a bunch of bubble wrap that I didn't need and just swapping that with my neighbors has been a really easy and creative way to reduce waste. So thinking about how can I get this secondhand and how can I give this back to someone so that they can get it secondhand are really great habit shifts that you can do. One last thing I want to share on this slide too, because of the time of the year it is, we're getting into holiday season, starting at Halloween all the way through the end of the year. Lots of stuff that comes with that. And so thinking more creatively about how we can celebrate those holidays that are so special to us while still reducing waste. So whether that's finding, creative alternatives to candies or low waste candies or low waste presents, or maybe skipping gifts altogether if that's what you're into. All of this time of year is an incredibly high period of consumption. And so right now is actually a perfect time to have this conversation to think about how can we do things differently so that we're not creating so much trash all the time. And finally, this is my last slide before handing it over to the King County folks. So I'm just going to tease a couple of ideas of ways that we can think bigger beyond our individual day-to-day habits or even our habits that will shift over time, is to think even bigger. These are all stock photos, but in our neighborhoods, in our city, and in the world, what are some things that we might build or create to facilitate a zero waste mindset? So some fun examples that I can think of off the top of my head are things like neighborhood clothing swaps. I've had girlfriends who are just like, hey, everybody, we're coming over next Friday, bring all the clothes that you don't want, and then someone's going to donate the rest that we don't use. Those are very easy community solutions that, don't need a lot of infrastructure or planning. It's just a group of friends changing materials. That can go as small as your group of friends or can be scaled up to community clothing banks or clothing closets. Things like little free pantries or little free fridges are really cool, where if I'm going out of town, I might take some leftovers that I have in my fridge, label them, and put them in a community fridge that are spread out all across my city. And again, grassroots community solutions that are really clever and creative ways to reduce waste. Scaling up beyond just like your neighborhood or your group of friends or family, thinking about like repair infrastructure. If you've ever, broken the screen on your smartphone or your laptop has started acting up, it's really great to know where the places are that you can take them to get them fixed affordably and quickly so that you don't have to resort to buying new technology and just tossing away what you had. A lot of the times those things can be fixed with a very special skill set. And so knowing where those places are and having access to them is so, so important in creating a zero waste world. You can repair things like shoes and clothes. I went to the cobbler for the first time when I learned about zero waste, and I got some shoes resold, it felt so like old school, but it's a very classic way to just keep those things being used. Same with tailors, sewists, all of those things are really great resources to know about in your community. I'm just looking at my list. And then thinking about statewide, so beyond just King County, some really important work is being done in the policy space that I know the King County folks will go into more depth of. But there's an organization called Zero Waste Washington that I'm involved with. And if you look them up, you'll get way more detail than I'm able to share with you today. But essentially what they're doing is finding the legal and policy pathways to make sure that zero waste is kind of like the default in Washington state. So things like banning plastic bags were partially work that was done by Zero Waste Washington, making composting more accessible to people all across the state, not just in big cities, is other work that's being done. Finding ways to creatively reuse furniture and get that repaired and redistributed? Is other work being done by that organization? So there are lots of groups besides Zero Waste Washington, but that's just one example that's easy to share and easy to remember the name. And finally, before I hand it off, last thing I want to say is this fall, thinking about election season, there is a bunch of initiatives on the ballot, and one of them being the No on 2117. And I'm not allowed to say what to do with that, which way to vote. But what I will say is that what that's trying to do is take funding away from initiatives that are solving problems that we're talking to today. So if you do your research on initiative or I-2117, and what that is, that's an important place to look about creative ways that we're trying to get funding as a state to fund solutions that we're talking about in this time. So check that out and keep that in mind when you go to the ballots this year. So I'm going to stop there and again, drink some water and hand it off to our King County folks.
Awesome. All right, so Nina and I are just gonna share a little bit about resources at King County and programs that we work on. There's a big team of folks working in recycling and solid waste kind of things at the county. So we're just two people trying to share about what a lot of other people work on. So bear with us as we explain these programs. You can go to the next slide. First, I wanted to call back to that pie chart and graph that Moji shared back at the beginning that talked about the waste characterization that King County does. So we know that about 70% of what's going to our landfill shouldn't go there. There's better things that can be done with that. It can be composted or recycled or reused or avoided altogether. And so we made what we are calling the RE+ plan, which is rethinking, reusing, recycling, all of these actions that will get us to a place where we avoid sending about 70% of that stuff to the landfill. And this vision is created with community in mind. So we want to be building this new circular economy together with frontline communities who have historically not been included or even been, dumping grounds for our waste. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the programs that make up this RE+ plan. But before we do that, we wanted to share a video that kind of gives a high-level overview. So we're going to go to the video.
One second.
In a small shop in North Seattle, a tool as simple as a sewing machine is a key to unlocking someone's future.
Just imagine you come from war-torn countries, so much unlike Seattle. As an immigrant coming here, the only thing you really know to do is using sewing machine and use your hands.
Ming Tung Edelman's business, the Refugee Artisan Initiative, not only creates new opportunities for people in need, it also creates new life for old stuff that would normally be headed for the landfill.
I learned that 85% of textile get thrown away. So perhaps we can combine refugee and immigrant women and these textiles to create a circular economy. So that was sort of my dream. And here we are today.
Innovative projects like this are part of King County's new RE+ plan, a 21st century response to our waste problem.
We are in the overconsumption world right now. The easiest thing to hit that online button to purchase. But for me, it's like, what do I do after I don't want this product?
Every year, we send hundreds of thousands of tons to the landfill. We're filling it full of materials, and that has to end.
Cedar Hills is 13 miles south of Seattle city limits. This is the major disposal site for the King County transfer stations.
Our
all garbage that is at your curbside and comes from your home eventually ends up here at the Cedar Hills Regional Landfill. We accept 2,400 to 3,000 tons of garbage per day.
That's enough garbage to fill more than 100 semi-trucks. Here's the catch. About 70% of the stuff in these trucks isn't technically garbage.
A lot of what we're receiving here should not be here. Paper, plastic, cardboard, wood, metal, all those items could be recycled. And then there are a lot of items that could definitely be reused. Put on the curb, even with a free sign on it, I'm pretty sure somebody would have picked it up, but nobody wanted to take the time to see what their resources are, of where it could go, where it could be reused, and they just threw it away.
The largest load of what's going to our landfill in King County is organic material. That's yard waste and food waste. That is creating a huge greenhouse gas burden because it rots and creates methane gas.
If we could pull those items out of our waste stream, that would reduce our greenhouse gas emissions.
The recyclable, reusable, and compostable items we're all just throwing away contribute to climate change and are filling up King County's only landfill, fast. At our current pace, the landfill will be full by 2040.
So we are on the clock. Time is running out. When our landfill does fill up, it's ultimately going to have to go somewhere. It's going to cost a lot of money for the next generation to have to handle this if we don't start tackling it now.
That's where King County's RE+ plan comes in.
RE+ is really about trying to create healthy, safe, vibrant, but a waste-free King County. One of the most exciting things is around policy, actually. So policy sounds very dry, but in actual fact, it's people coming together, kind of making a decision to do things differently.
In the coming years, King County will be supporting state-level action and working with local cities to reinvent how we manage our waste. We'll coordinate policies around disposal so that every part of King County has the same rules for recycling and composting, so it's less confusing.
There are areas of King County where we don't have organics collection yet. And we want all of our residents to be putting their yard scraps and their food waste into the bin, as well as all our businesses that have organic waste, so that we can divert it from the landfill to composting.
We'll also work with manufacturers to reduce waste and find new ways to fund our recycling system.
It's time to enact some policies where we actually have the manufacturers and the businesses take responsibility for the end of life of that material.
So rather than ratepayers paying for recycling services, it'll be the producers of paper and packaging products.
And lastly, we'll work with you, our community, to inspire ideas that shape the future of waste disposal.
So it's about investing in communities through grants. So instead of it going to landfill, it goes to support a job somewhere. It goes to support a new product. Grants being awarded to frontline communities are particularly exciting because that sort of imagines this future world where we do have this equitable future for all being delivered.
There are so many challenges in a circular economy. Not only these materials are not recyclable, a lot of times it requires collecting, cleaning. I personally think that having these funding allows us to really think outside the box. Not only prove the concept, but hopefully become a sustainable project that we can actually expand and scale to hire more refugee immigrant women while taking, who knows what the next material might be, but we'll be up for the challenge, knowing that this success can set a foundation for our future endeavor.
Awesome. Thank you for managing our slides and video. So I know we are getting really close to the end of our time here, so I'm gonna speed up this last little bit, but we're just going to talk through a couple of those programs mentioned. The first one is one of the main things I work on is advocating for state policy. And our highest priority right now is to pass what's called extended producer responsibility for packaging and paper. So that it would be transitioning our system from right now where you and I, everyone, we pay for our garbage and recycling service at the curb. Instead, we want to put that responsibility on the producers of materials. So like the people making, your soda can would actually pay for each package they produce. And that would create an incentive for them to, in the first place, produce less packaging, but also make their packaging more recyclable, and be buying back those resources and cycling them back through and using them again. I would love to go into more detail about that another day if people have questions, because it's a big shift in our system, but a very cool way that we think we could really bring that circularity into implementation more. And I'll pass it to Nina to talk about some of the other things we're doing.
Thanks, Hannah. I want to thank both Hannah and Moji. Hannah for introducing the Replus Plan program, and Moji for sharing the opening or for kicking us off, but also for sharing the disposed waste composition pie graph. Because if you all can remember, a large percent of that pie graph included organics and food waste. Also, what Heather Trim mentioned in the Replus video is that a lot of the organics and food that end up into our landfill create methane gas. And that's where part of the Replus plan includes our organics and food waste initiatives. We're currently providing technical support to businesses to help them keep their food waste out of the landfill and manage it as a valuable resource. We're also helping optimize collection services for food and yard waste for all single-family households in King County. The Solid Waste Division is also conducting research on ways this waste can be turned into a resource such as compost, as mentioned, but also potentially create renewable biogas energy that can help power businesses and homes, and that research is ongoing. At the beginning of this year, something to consider is that there was a new organics management law passed that actually requires businesses to sign up for organics collection. So as a result, we have been helping the cities of King County change their policies to comply, engage with food service businesses, and work with haulers on food waste collection. And the county is also planning to build out further facilities to support this. And lastly, the Replus program single family organics collection aims to optimize food and yard waste collected for all single family households by focusing on areas with low subscription rates to increase participation. By implementing new strategies and policy changes, the program hopes to divert almost up to 22,000 tons of food waste, which helps reduce emissions and extend the landfill life. And lastly, you'll see that fun Food Too Good to Waste program, which aims to encourage residents to make small and simple changes, many of which Moji talked about tonight, and how to shop, store, and prepare food. Aspects of the program include smart food storage, smart shopping, food preparation, and understanding food labels. Next slide. Mixed waste processing. This is another Replus program and research that our team is tackling. Mixed waste processing, think of it as your last screen for capturing recyclables out of the waste stream. And this graphic here shows the benefits from mixed waste processing, including diversion and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and creating jobs. So what mixed waste processing is it uses various types of sorting and processing equipment to remove valuable resources from the waste stream. So waste would be fed into a facility, and those recyclables that were shown on the video would be separated out from the residual or the rest of the garbage. Once separated, these resources are sorted and prepared for sale, reuse, or recycling. So Replus is conducting an analyses and research around this this potential process, and we are using expert consultants to help us with the best mixed waste processing method to keep our King County our King County needs. Next slide. Another wonderful aspect about the RePlus program that Ming that opened up today's video is our RePlus Circular Economy grants. So we created a grant program to stimulate a waste-free economy through inclusive and equitable grants, technical support, and guidance. Our funding programs include the RePlus Circular Economy Grants, which is $2 million worth of competitive grant program open to private, nonprofit, and public entities to support waste prevention and waste diversion. It also includes what's called the Next Cycle Washington. Think of recycle and our Next Cycle Washington, which is a really fun, innovative platform and accelerator program for organizations and businesses looking to divert materials and using recycled materials in manufacturing. The Next Cycle Washington program also supports smaller entities and community groups. So if you are a small business owner, innovator, inventor, a social and environmental justice advocate, and or just community member, and you have a zero waste project or program, we encourage you to apply for these grant opportunities. We have grant application technical support we can provide you, and more information. We'll be launching our grant programs in the next coming year, so please stay in the loop, and I'll be ending my slides here real quick with ways to stay in touch. But these grant opportunities are set up for you, King County, to help us prevent and divert waste, reduce emissions and environmental impacts, and bolster recycling and reuse markets. And this is just a fun photograph of Second Use receiving some grant funding, and they're cutting the ribbon there. Just really exciting. Next slide, please. And lastly, but certainly not least, part of our RePlus plan included the creation of a RePlus community panel. So we bring together diverse communities and voices to chart a path toward a more equitable and waste-free King County. This panel is guiding the implementation of our RePlus plan to better address the needs of King County communities that have been historically excluded and underserved. Each of the 10 people on this panel identify as a frontline community member. The community panel formed in 2022 and meets regularly. The meetings again are used to discuss how each of our RePlus actions can be more community friendly and develop evaluation methods to measure impact on equity, community engagement, and tribal relations. These groups will inform the new and existing RePlus actions and programs. Without this panel, a lot of the work we do at the RePlus program would not be successful and would not have the positive and strategic community impact we want those programs to have. Next year, we're really excited. The RePlus community panel will be accepting applications for a spot to serve on this panel to center, again, frontline community member perspective. So if you are interested, please stay in the loop, apply. We'd love to have you as a part of our community panel. And with that, I know I've been saying stay in the loop a lot. The following is a QR code to stay in the loop for our newsletter. So it's going to take you to kind of a wonky King County government webpage. If you know government webpages, they tend to be a little wonky. But what it is a way to sign up for our newsletter. So this will take you to the main King County newsletter sign up page. And you'll have a drop down menu of different newsletters to get involved with. You can join our Solid Waste Division's newsletter, our RePlus specific newsletter, our Department of Natural Resources newsletter. Our King County Metro is a really great one to join too, to stay in the loop on Metro bus line closures, understanding what's happening in the Metro region. Just some really great communications to opt in and out of using this QR code. And I can post a link in the chat. So Thank you so much, Moji, Hannah, and our wonderful hosts tonight. And that concludes our King County overview.
Thanks, everyone. We are going to do a quick Mentimeter poll before we close out for the evening. And I encourage you all to stay on because Samana is going to talk a bit about our raffle prizes. So for staying on, you get to see what we have for our raffle prizes tonight. So if you can use this QR code, or we'll also drop the link into the chat. We want to just have an opportunity to hear from folks about what you're taking away from this presentation. Moji, can you stop sharing for a moment? Thank you. And I will share my screen so that folks can see how folks are answering. So go ahead and take a moment to click on that link, or if you want to use the QR code, that's also easier, if that's easier for you, to go ahead and fill this out. It's really helpful for us as we plan out our future workshops. So appreciate, we have all your raw comments too. So not just the word cloud. So feel free to add to your comments about what you're taking away. Lots of zero waste ideas, creativity, community. Awesome. Got 28 responses. It's a pretty decent number of people. Okay. 31. Oh, that's almost everyone. Okay. If you want to answer what is something you want to learn more about, this is just helps us for any future workshops we want to do, or if there's something you want, more resources we can send as a follow-up. This is your opportunity and place to do that. So your question should have changed. If you want to add that in, I will leave this up so you can feel free to keep adding things in, but I will pass to Samara to close us out. So I'm going to stop sharing this, but you can still reply. So please do reply because that helps us with our planning.
Thanks, Jamie. Can you share the last slide of our deck?
I'm on it.
So as Jamie was saying, we try to do a giveaway every time we do this learning series to also provide additional resources to the community, such as books. And so if you could just fill out our post survey, you can give us more feedback there. Okay. And then I also want to read this comment from Mireta Purepecha in Spanish. They're saying that they would like to have time the next workshop for the participants to provide their analysis. So I think more commentary and discussion would be wanted, which makes sense. We did do a lot of presentation and not as much engagement with the community's voices today. So that's some direct feedback there. Thank you, whoever's here from Mireta. So as I was saying, we have a post survey that I just put on the link. That's definitely where you can add additional comments. And if you fill out our survey, you will be put into a giveaway for these two really great books, Consumed by Aja Barber, The Need for Collective Change, Colonialism, Climate Change, and Consumerism. I'm a big fan of Aja's work. She's really amazing and breaks down very complicated terms and concepts, and then pollution is colonialism. Also, for this specific workshop, we have a giveaway of a gift card if you would like for Public. So I'm putting the link for that shop in the in the chat. But essentially, Public is like a store you can go and buy some of the products that like Moji was mentioning during her presentation. So if you want to have ways to store your food differently, have things to take to the grocery store to be zero waste, etc. Maybe buy some zero waste or low waste like cosmetics or cleaning products, etc. This store has a bunch of different things that you can choose from, and it's located down in West Seattle. So for those of you who are in the South, and maybe it might be a little closer, but they also do online shopping. So yeah, just please feel free to fill out our survey, and from there we'll pick a couple winners for these gift cards and books. And Jamie mentioned at the very top, we're going to have in October workshop that's going to actually be in person to celebrate Indigenous Peoples History Month. More information on that to come soon via email. And then in December, we'll have our last Climate Justice 101 of the year. But thank you so much for everyone that stayed until now. We really appreciate your attendance on a Monday night. I'll put my email in the chat as well, so if anyone wants to follow up. But thank you again so much, and thank you to our awesome presenters. And yeah, hope everyone has a good start of your week.
Thank you, everyone. And Moji added her email to the chat as well if you want to follow up with Moji. And Samara is happy to connect you